Pay to the Ask Me Anything from the data team of Delta Emerald at CannaDataCon. My name is Trist'n Joseph. I am with Delta Emerald. I'm a data scientist on the team, and I've been with the team for like 2.5-ish years. So, and this is.
Thank you. I am David. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm the data architect at Delta Emerald. I've been around for 3 years, I think, this month actually. So I think it's my anniversary, like one of these. I don't remember. But yeah. So yeah. Anybody have questions?
Are you guys doing deals right now?
That's a question for the investment team, but the answer is yes. Yeah, Chris.
How big is the data set you guys look at, and what's it made of? And what data do you guys look at?
Beeps and boops. So your question is, how big is the data that we're working with, and what is it made out of? So we're dealing with terabytes of data. And so this is the type of data that you cannot run on a single computer. You might need distributed compute for that. And so your next question is probably, what do you use for that? We use Spark. Love Spark. Love Databricks. This session is not sponsored. And then you're asking also, what is it made out of? We are primarily on the one way to think about data in cannabis is you have a supply chain, you have everything from cultivation to distribution, you have brands, you have retail and so forth. We are closest to the consumer in terms of the kind of data that we're working with, but we are spreading through the supply chain to cover distribution, cultivation, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
As you guys have looked at the data, has there been anything that you came in that was like a hypothesis that you disproved, or something that you found particularly unique?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing, and this will also be highlighted in my presentation tomorrow, so feel free to come to that. But the amount of spend that customers are spending per month, especially high value customers or high frequency customers, how much they're spending per month on just cannabis products in all product categories. And something very surprising that we found is that there are customers who would come more than 3 times per month, having average basket values of over $400, which is crazy to think. If someone comes in, let's just say just 3 times a month, it's $1,300 you're spending on weed. It's crazy.
So that's.
Are you able to tie that and determine whether or not like that ties into like gray market transactions?
So I'm gonna continue answering the first part of your question and totally ignore the second part. So that's one thing is customer spend. Ian talked about this earlier as well, which is delivery, right? Retail in retail store sales are still king. We've also when I first started, I was really excited about brands, and I think that was also part of like the irrational exuberance in the space. Everyone's talking about brands because, frankly, it's easy to think about brands when you're not familiar with the supply chain as a whole, right? So a lot of the initial conversation, like 3 years ago, a lot of the conversations revolved around what brands are going to be king, right? Like which brands are consumers going to flock to? And the reality is that there is a ton of brands that, for whatever reason are there and probably shouldn't be there. Like not the brand, right? But like last year went to several conferences. I just don't understand how many more new brands we need in California for flower. Like, help me understand. So that's another thing. And then we can keep going down the list, right? But there's a lot of sort of assumptions that one makes with the information that's available to you or lack thereof. Yeah, the second part of your question was gray market.
That was more just a dovetail off.
Yes.
I mean, I would say right now, we probably don't know. I mean, we don't necessarily have a way, especially of the black market, to track where those sales are going. Right now, we just have an understanding of this is how frequent customers are coming, this is what you're buying. Did you have another option that talks more to supply, but why are you buying what you're buying and how much are you spending? How frequently are you coming back to purchase it? So.
So as data scientists, are you guys ever, tell me something about cannabis that makes doing data science in cannabis like just other domains?
Yeah.
What makes doing data science or data things in cannabis particularly either weird or cool was the question for the.
I got a rant.
I think the one of the largest problems, and that kind of just speaks to how deep we can go into analysis and how solid analysis might be, maybe two things, but they're very similar. One being like a unified product catalog, for example. One data set and even maybe one service provider might have, let's just say product categories. Their data set might have 9 very distinct, well-defined product categories that make doing analysis quite easy. But then when you transition to another data set or like another store or something like that, we've seen data sets of product categories of over like 1,000 product categories. And the reason is because there's no like real data normalization happening. Most of this data is, user entered. So if someone puts flowers with an S versus a Z, it's 2 very distinct things that come across, or 2 unique IDs from a data perspective. So trying to do like some aggregation or normalization back to what was this likely supposed to be is quite hard.
That's very hard.
And then the second part of it where we try to focus a lot on is understanding the customer and customer behavior. And because of how data is being tracked right now, specifically in cannabis, and maybe because of regulations or lack thereof, it's very possible for a returning customer, to show up as a new customer, even if a particular organization has like multiple stores and that store is rolled up under one organization. But if they're using, let's say, 2 different point of sales, for example, for whatever reason that might be, that customer might not be appropriately tracked between those 2 distinct stores, although they're under the same organization. Thus, trying to, let's say you want to target your customer for repeat purchases or something like that, it becomes increasingly more difficult because, again, they might be a returning customer. They might be one of those customers who come back 3 times a month spending $400. But in a different data set, they're showing up as a net new customer.
I want to harp a little bit on the product catalog stuff. That is the vein of my existence. And I want to speak loudly about this because I think like this is something we need to be talking about. This is some technical debt that we've all accrued in the industry, and we need to start thinking about. As a data scientist, we hear founders and other investors and operators and so forth, with this exuberance about machine learning and product recommendation and all this, that wonderful. We cannot do that until we have a unified product data schema across the industry, right? If you have a brand that has factually 20 products that are distinct in any point of sale or e-commerce or loyalty service provider, that product, the list of 20 products is going to show up as 2,000 different products because we're playing telephone across the supply chain, right? The brand should be the true source, the source of truth for product data. However, people are entering like into a table at the distributor level, then you have employees, guessing how many grams of this or what product description is that, well, who knows? And then that shows up in the point of sale and the retailer's asking, what is my top selling product? Well, I don't know, because for the same product, you may have 200 different instances of distinct product IDs. So we cannot understand customers until we get our shit together with product data schema across brands through to the retailer. And everyone has to agree. And so we cannot understand customers, and therefore we cannot be making product recommendations. And that is the rant. So therapy session. Okay. Next.
Yeah, I want to know who's solving that problem. How much are you paying to have the problem solved?
That guy.
No, I don't know. More importantly, not more importantly, my actual question is, out of all the kind of funding firms in the space, I feel like Delta Emerald probably, at least in my experience, looks at data and has access to more data than your average funding firm. What is the goal of being able to see that data? And then what are the steps you are taking to reach those goals? Like what is the greater benefit that you're trying to provide?
So at Delta Emerald, we're a bunch of nerds. And we like to think about things as mathematically as possible, I guess. But there's this notion of exogeneity, right? Things that are dependent and independent, right? So entrepreneurship is in many instances about, I have this idea, I have this dream, and I want to push it down my customers' throats. That's not how we think about how entrepreneurship should be done. We feel that the customer is the exogenous variable in the equation, and their problem space is what we should be optimizing for. And so our goal is to first and foremost understand the consumer, right? If the consumer does not have demand, then why are we here, right? We know that there's demand. And in fact, as we saw in earlier presentations, demand is great. Demand is growing across customer base. And in fact, the consumer base is increasing in size. So we're trying to understand things that are independent so that we can then derive further inferences, right? And this is where it gets murky, but we're trying to understand what's true as hard as we can. For example, if you saw 400 brands 3 years ago, and then you see 10,000 brands today, does it make sense to invest in brands, right? Or does it make sense, like if you see that all of a sudden, I don't know, flour is dropping in sales compared to other product categories, does it make sense to invest in more cultivation facilities? Or, I'm just making random examples, but exogeneity is really important.
Makes sense.
Danny.
What is something dissonant that you hear in the market, people are talking about, or people investing in, or people marketing, that the data does not back up?
Okay, this one.
Sure, I think, good question. I think,
Can we repeat the question?
oh yeah, so
What is
what is-
dissonant?
what is something dissonant that we are seeing being marketed in the cannabis space that probably the data does not support to be true, was the question. One thing I think that, and David kind of touched on it a bit earlier during what he was saying, but this notion that delivery is kind of king and delivery is taking over the market. We also had a philosophy that delivery is probably extremely important, but when we did some analysis and dug very deep into the data. Even for those extremely high spending customers, they are still coming into the store. And most transactions are actually happening in store, in person. Delivery is a sizable portion of, I guess, revenue, and it is growing slightly, maybe, but in-person, in-store sales are definitely king at this point. And that's something that we found quite interesting when we looked at it. And again, to repeat, it's just not just for a particular segment, but all segments, especially the segment that is your high value, high frequency customers.
Following up on that, do you see more crossover, because pickup has become a big part of the business?
Yeah.
And do you see more crossover pickup to in-store or pickup to delivery? In terms of at the customer level, or have you looked at that?
Yeah, so we have, and just to repeat the question, are we seeing any crossover between delivery sales being crossed over to in-store?
Customers that are mostly pickup customers,
Mhm.
Do those cross over and do more in-store, or do they do more delivery? The pickup customers, whether you looked at that, or
Yeah.
not, just because that's such a big segment that, in new markets.
For sure. So for those customers who are pickup customers, do they cross over to in-store or delivery? Great question. And what we've actually found is that for customers who pick a dominant, fulfillment channel, they actually don't really cross over. So they tend to stick to their preferred channel, like for all of their life. Those customers who do, it kind of tends more towards in-store pickups. So it is quite constant over time, especially because if the customers are repeating, they tend to just pick one and stick to one. But if there is some crossover, we see that it's tending more towards in-store sales.
You could call this like fulfillment promiscuity. We're not seeing that much. From that perspective, we're seeing more of that at the brand level, specifically for flower, right? When it comes to vapes and stuff like that, I think consumers, and this is my opinion, I don't know for a fact, I'm just inferring, I assume that they're expecting the same experience every time, right? So if you're looking at a vape or like cartridges or whatever, stuff like that, and then when it relates to product category, we're also seeing less promiscuity, right? So if you love flower, you're probably gonna stick with flower. If you don't find the brand you're looking for, you're already at the retail store, or you're already wanting to get stoned, right? So you're
Just question on that, when you guys are looking at the data sets, obviously certain states and certain markets don't allow for delivery. Are you factoring that into your analysis?
Yes. Yeah, so the question is, different states are different in terms of fulfillment. And yes, we're looking at different states for that and factoring for that.
Andrew.
What is the biggest research question that you have right now that you can't answer or haven't been able to answer?
The question is, what is the biggest research question we have that we are not able to answer?
It irks you,
Well, right, so I'll give you two. So the first one relates to again, this product catalog stuff. Like what are customers actually buying, right? Like if you could collapse everything to a true product ID, what is that across the different consumer clusters that we've derived? I think we have like 6 different consumer clusters based on spend and other attributes. The second is obviously, as per the numbers that we've shown, spend has increased and also demand has increased in the legal market. I don't know what's going on in the illegal market, right? I assume it's also flourishing, but I am obsessed with distributions. I love thinking about how distributions evolve over time. I don't have a strong sense of that distribution. More questions?
I think, virtual.
John,
Okay, have you looked at the wholesale data sets, retail data sets, and looked at kind of correlations or latent pricing behavior in terms of, you know, wholesale pricing, retail pricing?
So have we looked at and compared wholesale data versus retail data and tried to see if there's any correlation between those two?
Obviously, same market.
Same market, of course. Easy answer, I would say no, but technically, so we don't have full coverage into, at the moment, wholesale data. We do have some metrics that we can use as proxies for supply, for example. And then, well, the retail data gives us demand. So we are able to use, you know, proxies of supply, compare that to demand, and try to understand what's happening there. But that is something that we do have on our roadmap to understand better and look into deeper when we can.
There is one question from online. And this gets back to David, your commentary on the product catalog. And so organizations like OpenTHC, how do you see those factoring in, or what sort of incentives do they provide, or does the industry need to architect a universal product catalog?
So I'm not too familiar with OpenTHC. I don't know what their product backlog looks like. However, I do think it is an industry wide initiative that needs to take place. And I feel like the little loud kid in the corner, like screaming like, hey, we all need to like do this together. I think the challenge is that it is like technical debt, right? Like it is a problem that you have that you may not know you have until shit hits the fan, right? And so I think like if we had a better understanding of product data, it would benefit the entire supply chain, not just the brands or the retailers. It would improve the quality of consumer as well, because they would know what they're, you know, brands would be able to better serve them as well. So I think it's an industry-wide problem.
Okay, follow up to you, who in the data chain, and to your point, there's a lot of steps in the data chain.
Yeah.
Some of which involve taking a system and putting it into a spreadsheet, putting it into another system. Who in the data chain do you think is most perhaps obligated, maybe is the word, given the need that you're just expressing, or like has the best opportunity in order to actually start solving that problem?
The question is, who should be solving this product catalog problem?
Motive and opportunity.
Who has motive and opportunity? I don't know. I think so. So I have opinions, but I also don't know, right? So I have opinions that brands are spending ungodly amounts of money on marketing and branding and stuff like that, where you don't have proper that should be step one, data, right? So step one should be get the data right, and then get the content about the data right, which itself is data, right? So I think service providers to brands should be educating brands, because brands don't seem to be sophisticated enough to be thinking about data schemas down the supply chain. So and frankly, like who would be thinking about this, right? Like, like
my ass.
exactly.
So I mean, conceivably a Jane benefits from the lack of a universal product catalog, right? That's part of one of their models. brands and retailers would benefit, but there are players who would, benefit from the fact that it is complex or not,
Well, I think a Jane would benefit even more if the data were coming clean down the supply chain, right? So I think like distributors, for example.
What about like metric and
Is it
biotracking?
So
States have to do it.
no, okay, I love this. Like we're having an argument. Like, so we're having some debate about who, like, is the government responsible for that? I think the government is barely keeping the lights on a track and trace service that barely works. Sorry if I offend anyone. But how do you expect them to figure out this problem? The problem itself is more sophisticated than the service that they're able to build. And so I think for anybody who's thinking about providing services to brands or even distributors, marketplaces, stuff like that, they're connecting product from one component of supply chain to the next. They should be capturing true data that then maybe is available via API for subsequent components of the supply chain. But I don't know the answer, man. Yeah.
Well, I think that the brands have the motive because they'll make the most money from it, is what you.
Right,
said.
but retailers also have.
Metric has the opportunity.
Right.
Because they literally connect.
I mean, as Happy Cabbage, wouldn't it be great for you guys to have sweet, clean data that you wouldn't have to clean, like,
Yeah.
right? Like.
Yeah, but I'm not an optimist.
Okay. We got a question over here.
You're a realist. I'm a very data realist.
Probably could, or I guess this, I thought of two questions. So like one, like, is there any like demographical information that can be extracted from these data sets, or is it all like de-identified already? And I guess the other question was more so around like from the sale, like the data that you're receiving, like, do y'all ever envision kind of serving like analytics as a product for the, like, I guess the companies that are within the data set itself? Like, is that something that could be like, hey, we can just build dashboards as a product for you?
Yeah.
This will tell you what your trends, what your seasonality looks like and all that.
Yeah, so we're not violating any PII rules, and I'm proud to, say that, but also it's like kind of sad because like I want to know all the things, right? But we do protect and the data that we're getting is not, it doesn't have any like personal information. That does not preclude those operators, and I'm using the term operator kind of loosely, but it does not preclude those operators from being able to further ascertain patterns between specific customer demographics and specific behavioral patterns, stuff like that. The second part of your question relates to, are we thinking about building artifacts for external operators? The answer is that we currently share intelligence with the companies on our portfolio, and that is one of our primary functions, is to empower them as much as we can. I don't know. I don't know how much further we're gonna go with that. Yeah, I don't know. Other questions? Question.
Where do you see your, like, I guess, like, what's your tech stack now and where do you see it in 5 years and like with all the like new tools like EBT and all that jazz?
We're getting real. So the question is, what is our tech stack? So do you want to speak to that?
I mean, sure. So I guess maybe we can break it up into like the different data artifacts that we have, as we have multiple, but
Wait, we can't name names.
right, for like ingestion, aggregation, running, jobs and whatnot. We are currently like on the cloud, so AWS. For our processing, we're using Databricks and their various orchestration and service layers. And to actually run the aggregations, we're using PySpark. And then we have various tools that like, for example, we have dashboards. For our dashboards, currently we're using Plotly Dash and React to like pull the graphs and the make the front end look shiny and whatnot. And
Yeah, I mean, we use a variety of AWS tooling, right? Like everything from S3 to Code Artifact to I don't know, Lambdas. Lambdas pretty cool. Lambdas. We use Docker, we've used ECS, we're thinking about using Kubernetes, but like people are starting to talk about how Kubernetes is not that great. Even though you said that it's great. Yeah. Yeah, right, okay. You guys, so yeah, but I think what's really important is to be able to abstract the underlying environment that you're running your workloads on and being able to move that around anywhere. And I sound like a salesman for Docker 10 years ago. So, but yeah, portability workloads, love that.
We should wrap things up there. For anyone listening online, I encourage you to switch to the South Shore room where we'll wrap up the day with a keynote that's ongoing right now.